Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Biome podcast, a space for nurturing the ecosystem of business, body, and living. What would it be like if you gave your body a leadership role in your business and chose greater happiness every day? These are the conditions that create a healthy biome and a thriving business. I'm your host, Heather Nichols, and I'm so happy you're here. Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Entrepreneurial Biome podcast. Yet another dive into some cool, fun, and different conversations about nurturing the ecosystem of your business, your body, and living. It's all connected and it's all amazing. And you can, when everything flourishes, everything flourishes. So let's get into it. This time, we're going to be talking about intimacy and innovation. Kind of last week's podcast kind of led into this one. So if you didn't listen, you could go back and check that one out. It was on the ADHD entrepreneur. And at the end, I started to kind of open up some of this conversation around innovation and the 5 elements of intimacy in access consciousness, which are gratitude, allowance, honoring, vulnerability, and trust. And so, innovation, it's a kind of a buzzword, and it's also something that I would say really successful companies, businesses, people know that innovation is actually a very important part of what is required to stay relevant in the marketplace, to continue to have success or to build success, and also to really stay with the changing nature of things. One of the classic stories of how innovation had the refusal to innovate killed a company is Kodak and film. I remember growing up with little yellow rolls of film, and you'd have to buy film, and you had a camera, and you put the film in the camera, and you'd slide the film and plug it in, and that was how cameras were. That's how photography worked back in the day. And when the digital age came upon us and people started to innovate to digital photography, Kodak just refused to innovate. Basically, they were a major force, a major name, and major presence in the world of film and photography, and most, I would say, probably really had a pretty huge corner of the market. And when digital photography started to really take hold, Kodak didn't innovate and went way downhill. I think they're probably still around. I'm not sure, but nowhere near the name that they used to be when I was growing up. So if you refuse to innovate, if you think you've got the answer to the problem that, if you see your business as solving problems, that's a story for another time, because, if you create way beyond that, you'll be far more successful. But if you think you've got an answer, if you think your business is you've got it, you've got the model, you've got the business model, this is the answer, that's exactly the point at which you stop yourself. Any decision you make that you've gotten it right or that you have gotten it wrong, either one actually, you're digging your heels in, slamming on the brakes, and stopping the forward movement of your business in its tracks. And you can trace back, this is a little bit of a side detour, but you can trace back, if you have ever had a moment where maybe your money flows slowed way down, or things just felt like they came to kind of a standstill in your business. If you look at the point at which that occurred, you will see that you took some point of view. You took some point of view, either that you got it right or that you got it wrong or that something wasn't working or whatever. And when we take a point of view with that much intensity and force, we actually just completely shut down the movement of creation. A point of view, a conclusion is a solidity. It's a stop. It's a stopping point. It's a decision on the nature of things, and that there's no innovation that occurs after that. There's no forward movement that occurs, and business thrives and money flows in the context of movement, innovation, creation, and greater possibilities. And you've got to stay in that conversation as an entrepreneur, as a company, whatever your role is and however big your business may be, you've got to stay in that conversation to keep yourself relevant in the marketplace. Otherwise, you're going to atrophy, and your services, they might be really popular and successful now, but next year they won't be if you don't keep moving. And one of the things that is amazing about this is that it's like, so you can stay kind of abreast with the movement of things. Like if Kodak had, stayed abreast with digital, the digital movement, then that would have created something. But sort of like keeping up with the times. And then there is the reality of actually being on the innovative and creative edge of your industry and actually opening new doors, perceiving new possibilities, exploring new futures, and like continually opening things up. From your own awareness and the awareness of your team or your staff, that as you open that awareness, you open, and everybody brings to the table what they're aware of in the conversation of intimacy and creativity and innovation. It actually, and I'll just explain what I mean about intimacy in a moment, but it actually really begins to you begin to really like, you basically are on the leading, the forefront of the innovation and creation in your industry. You're creating futures. You're exploding your own business into new possibilities that nobody's ever considered before. And as you do that, you invite other people to, the party of what else is possible. I mean, somebody, came up with the idea of digital photography. It was probably more than just one person, but there are people that are sort of like the pioneers of new innovations that started to pioneer different conversations, different creations, because they were willing to take a risk. They were willing to trust themselves. They were willing to go out on a limb and take an adventure of creation. And as that occurs, the rest of the industry listens. It gets to receive and be inspired by what you're creating and play. And that's a kind of like healthy, generative kind of competition. But I would say more like, I like to call it leapfrogging, where it's like someone creates something and you're like, well, that's cool. And you get inspired by that. And then, or out creating is another way to say that. It's like you get inspired by what somebody else has created. You add that awareness to your own world. And then you go, well, what could I create that would be even greater than that? Not because you're trying to outdo them or like trample them or step on them, but you're actually like, let's all be in the conversation of creating a greater future. And there's enough for everybody. There's enough to go around for everybody. So let's see what we can create and how much, we can receive from everybody around us. So the piece that I wanted to really bring to this conversation is about the 5 elements of intimacy. That is, it's the fertile ground from which all else springs when it comes to creation and innovation. And in the spirit of the entrepreneurial biome, it's the, that beautiful, mineralized, healthy, vibrant soil where the entire biome can flourish. And that is, just really a different way of being with yourself and your coworkers. That is such an incredible gift. So let's dive in a little bit to these 5 elements of intimacy in regards to creation and innovation. And this is an access consciousness tool. One of my absolute go-to tools for everything, literally everything. Like, it's something that I'm always checking in with myself. Do I have intimacy with me? Am I playing there on that playground, And if I'm not, if I could have more, which is always the case, really, I keep choosing it, keep staying on my own creative edge of the exploration of those energies, because they're just so rich to have that as your world. In your world, there's so much richness that comes with it. So, okay, so vulnerability, gratitude, allowance, honoring, and trust. And, when people think of intimacy, they think of, some people think about sex, some people think about romantic relationships, like emotional intimacy, whatever that may be. I'm talking about a way bigger playground of intimacy here, which is really about these energies, these elements, these qualities and it has to start with you. If it doesn't start with you, it will not, you can't have it with anybody else. And we'll get there in terms of like, how would you bring this to your work relationships, your creative entrepreneurial relationships? Because it's pretty amazing what can show up when we do that. But it's got to start with you. If you don't have it with you, you can't have it with anybody else. If you have it with you, you can have it with your coworkers. You can have it with your partner, your, spouse, your children, your friends, your peers, all of that. Okay, so having vulnerability with you, what does that mean? It means that you got your back. Like, you're willing to actually not have barriers to yourself. And one of the things I'll say about the elements of intimacy is they feed each other, they play into each other, they inform each other very, very dynamically. And so with that, so that's, it's kind of, I guess I say that because it's almost hard to talk about vulnerability without having the allowance piece. And, they all feed each other. Vulnerability is really, it's like, okay, I'm willing to actually tell myself the truth about me. I'm willing to get present with me, lower my barriers, and go, gosh, these are the places where I'm great. And these are the places where I'm limiting myself. These are the places where I stop myself. These are the places where I'm, I really am, not being kind to me, or I am, doing competition with other people, or I am insecure, or I am, whatever it may be. It's like having the presence and the like barrierlessness with yourself, to just sit and like open belly, and soft belly. And it's like that dog that just, rolls on its back because it totally trusts you. And it's like, scratch my belly, I got nothing to hide, doing that with you. And as you do, you start to see things about you that you might not really want to see. You might not have been willing to see before, but this is also where the allowance comes in. And allowance is basically lack of judgment, like where judgment is absent. You're not going to judge you. So you open up your soft belly to you. You open up your inner world to you, your heart, your, inner workings, the good, the bad, the ugly. And you're able to do that when you're in allowance of you. So, and when you sort of commit to yourself to honor you, there's another one of the elements, to honor you by not judging. So it's like, I'm going to open myself up to myself. I'm going to sit here. I'm going to lower my barriers. I'm going to get real with me. And I am not going to judge what I find here. To the best of my abilities, I'm going to not judge me And I'm going to be in the question of what's right about this I'm not getting, what's right about me I'm not getting, to just like start to see that when I show myself these pieces of me that I've determined are not so great, I actually can change them. I can have greater choice. You know, I can choose something different here. I can explore something different. I can change it if I want to. I can realize that this is actually one of the greatest things about me that I've judged. So all this whole universe of you becomes available. And if you don't judge that and you're willing to honor you're willing to really go, you know what? I'm not going to like slam myself anymore. I'm not going to be hard on myself anymore. I'm going to be an adult of consciousness. Like I'm going to actually be present with me and demand that I show up in the creation of a greater future, because that's what I'm all about. If you're listening to this podcast, there's probably some aspect of you that, where you're like, yeah, let's have a different world. Like the world is not, I don't think anybody agrees that the world is great how it is now. It's very obvious that the world is sick. There's a lot of problems going on, and probably most people on the planet would say, yeah, please, can we change this? So we gotta do that with ourselves in order to the world can't be different if you're not willing to be different with you. That's where it starts. So honoring you by going, you know what? There's a life I'd like to create here. There's greater possibilities. I'd like to, be more successful with my business. I'd like to create more money. I'd like to contribute more to the world. I'd like to contribute more to my family, to my coworkers, whatever it is that you're doing. So I'm gonna honor that. I'm gonna honor that as the guiding kind of principle, energy, ask, request in my life. And in order to do that, I've got to get greater. So vulnerability and getting out of judgment, that's going to really move you on the, in the direction of greater, and the honoring of you and the honoring of the future you'd like to have. Trusting you is really about just knowing that you're not going to mess it up, you're not gonna, and you might make mistakes, like absolutely, but that's part of vulnerability and allowance is, hey, I might make some mistakes. I know I'm gonna make some mistakes. Okay, no problem, part of the deal, and I would say the great innovators of our world, that's one of the qualities of somebody who's really willing to innovate is they're absolutely willing to make mistakes. You like the light bulb. How many versions of the light bulb were there before there was a light bulb? I don't know, but probably a lot, and so all of the great innovations in our world have come from out of somebody who was willing to absolutely mess it up. I do that. I cook a lot. I make cocktails. And in the kitchen, it's like, I'm willing to make mistakes. I make a lot of things that aren't so good. Sometimes I throw them out. Sometimes I make a cocktail with really expensive, beautiful liquor and it tastes like crap and I pour it down the drain, because I'm willing to also honor my body and not be like, well, it's expensive liquor, I better drink it. I don't have that point of view. So there's a freedom of creativity and innovation when you have the safety, the trust to make mistakes that, most people are so interested in trying to get it right and in getting it right that they don't give themselves a creative and innovative playground at all, because it's all about, I have to get this right. And if you have to get the recipe, the cocktail, the light bulb, the new creation, the new right at the first pass, you won't even start. You won't even start. And if you're going to judge yourself for sure, if you mess up, you won't even start. So many brilliant innovators and creators of our world, they sit back, they hold back because they don't have these elements of intimacy with them. So trusting you, trusting the process, trusting that you got your back. You're going to just keep going, never give up, never give in, never quit. Gary Douglas, the founder of Access Consciousness, says that all the time. And he says, that's how you succeed. If you never give up, never give in, never quit, you will succeed. but you've got to have those elements of intimacy in that. Well, you will give up, you will give in, and you will quit if you don't have them. So gratitude. Do you have gratitude for you, my dear friend? What if you could? And the beauty of gratitude is that it's the antidote to judgment. So you can't have gratitude and judgment in the same space. They cancel each other out. So one of them is going to prevail. Is it going to be judgment or is it going to be gratitude? They can't coexist. So if you're judging you, you're not grateful for you. If you're grateful for you, you can't judge you. That facilitates that allowance dynamically. And what if you woke up every day and you were like, I am grateful for me, that I'm just willing to show up every day. I'm willing to get out of bed and show up every day. I'm so grateful for me for that. And when you cultivate that space of gratitude, even if you fail, quote unquote, at something, what if you could, even in your greatest failure, have gratitude, have allowance, have vulnerability, have trust and honoring of you in your greatest failures? Because there's no such thing as a failure. It's just information and awareness for the next choices that you can make that will be greater than what you have today. So if that's your point of view, if that's your perspective on creation and innovation, it's all forward movement, no matter what the result is. The result doesn't matter. And eventually you will get to something that is like dynamic, like the innovation that is super dynamic, creative, and successful in the world, something that is desired by the world and purchased and, whatever it is that you're doing in your business. If you keep going. So vulnerability, allowance, gratitude, honoring, and trust, the 5 elements of intimacy with you. And you can see how if you have this with you, you start to show up in the world in a really different way. Your relationships will change. Every single one of them will change. You're with your children, your partner, your spouse, your, significant other, whatever you want to call it. With your body, your relationship with your body will change. Your coworkers, your business, your money, it'll all change the more you cultivate this space. So now let's talk about how you bring this to the workplace in terms with that innovation, the conversation of innovation. Because in the workplace, there's a lot of, most companies have some level of politics. Doesn't matter how conscious you think your business or your company is, there's going to be some politics. There's going to be points of view. There's going to be conflicting points of view. There's going to be people pulling in different directions. There's going to be egos involved. People that want something because they just want it, and that always, that trumps our capacity to see. One of my very favorite questions is what's going to create the greatest here? What's going to create the most? Because when I'm looking at anything I'm looking at, if I ask that question, I sit back in kind of a more bird's eye view. It includes me, but it's not about me. And then it's like, cool, if I was actually really interested in a greater planet, a greater world, a greater future, greater consciousness, greater innovation and creation, greater kindness, a greater world. If I was interested in that, how would I move in such a way that, what would I create here? What would I be? What would I do here that would actually create the most? And then you don't have to vie for what you've decided is important, necessary. You can include other people's points of view, and you start to work in a much more collaborative way. And so when we do that, there's a lot that opens up. So if you, as much as you can, lean into this conversation of gratitude, allowance, honoring, vulnerability, and trust with you. And now bring that to your work environment, and if you have, this will be particularly effective if you have people that you work with, But, you know, if you don't, you can just even play with this with your business or your clients or your creations, because this applies to everything, you know, and seeing like the entity of your business as its own entity, its own kind of energy, you know. But if we look at the like a coworker situation, and you're innovating and you're creating with other people, and you are vulnerable, you're willing to be vulnerable with those people because you are with you. So, you know, again, it all starts with you. You have that with you. So you're willing to be vulnerable with other people. You're willing to be like, I totally fucked that up. That was actually not correct. You know, I made a mistake, or I really have a strong sense here that this is going to create something. Could we please look from a different point of view, you know, but without fighting, without the pressure to push against, because that's so much of where like people create from this push and this pressure rather than a relaxation into intimacy and innovation. And we all know when we're relaxed, when we're resourced, when our bodies are happy and thriving, we are so able to move in the world with just, we have so many more choices available to us, and we interact with people in a much greater way. So that's important. It's really important to have those resources online. And that's something to be cultivating in your own world all the time. You know, I mean, for me, my body is a massive priority because when my body is really happy and thriving and vibrant and alive, I feel good. I'm actually operating from pleasure. Oh my gosh, what can open up is just incredible. And I don't have to, I'm not in survival. I'm not in fight or flight with me. I'm in very dynamic resourcefulness, intimacy with me, and I can contribute to the world, my children, my coworkers, everything in just such a greater way. So with that, if you like imagine being resourced in that way with your coworkers, you know, you're rested, you're cared for, your body's happy, you have these elements of intimacy with you, you have your back. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to fight anything. You don't have to push against anything. The doors for creativity open wide. They just fling open when you function from that space. And you start to be like, have this vulnerability with your coworkers, and then add allowance, you know, not judging people, like getting into this place of where it's like, you're really like somebody brings an idea, or somebody is doing something, maybe somebody is doing something that's really annoying, you know, and you're just like, I'm so irritated by you and your ego, you know. But that, if you actually are willing to choose to not judge that, and one of the greatest tools for allowance is called interesting point of view. So this is an access consciousness tool. You literally just say it. You just say, okay, you get present with you and you just go, interesting point of view. I have this point of view about this person. And you just say that over and over to you but you say it in a way that is energetic. It starts to melt your own barriers and cultivate. So you're getting into allowance and vulnerability, where it's like things you kind of stand down, you know, with your points of view. And you're like, okay, interesting point of view. I have this point of view about this person and this situation, you know, and you're present enough with you that you can do that. And then you can really embrace, like, look from a very wide open perspective at somebody, what they're doing, what they're bringing. And from the point of view of allowance, it's like, wow, yeah, this person is, whatever may be going on. And it's not about having like compassion for them. Compassion can be a little sticky, because it sometimes puts us in this like superiority with people where we're like, oh, well, they're just, they just weren't loved as a child, and so that's okay. You know, it's not about that. It's like, there's a space of curiosity, of like, okay, cool. Well, I have a point of view about this. So I know that things will be greater if I don't have a point of view. So I'm going to get to interesting point of view here with this person, with this project, with this thing. Take some space, whatever you need to do. trusting that, the process will move. And when it comes to other people, you can also trust that people will show up the way that they show up. And it's not about concluding, oh, this person's always going to be this way. But it's like, if someone continually, shows up and disrupts a meeting or disrupts a creative process, rather than being in reaction to that, if you trust that, if you're like, okay, this is how this person does this thing, I can trust that. Because trust in the different context, the way that most of us see trust is more about like the trust of that we that, like when someone behaves the way that you want them to behave, you can trust them. But that really doesn't work very often, So this is more about the pragmatics of trust and going, I'm going to trust that someone that, like, if this person is like they're going to, this is how they show up, they'll continue to do that, and they can change too, but I'm going to have allowance of that. And then you can actually start to work with that rather than fight against it and resist it. You can start to work with it. Okay. Vulnerability, allowance, trust, honoring and gratitude. I mean, being honoring of the people that you work with, truly honoring, not letting them walk all over the process or walk all over you, or, sit back and be, not bring brilliant ideas that they might be having, but truly honoring, them as the unique contribution and the unique creature that they are. And when you have a culture of that, it's amazing to see what can show up. And gratitude, having gratitude. What if even the most annoying people that you work with, you could have interesting point of view with, you could be an allowance of, you could have gratitude for them. And when you have, and this is a very like deep conversation. I mean, there's ways that I can work with. If you do have a team and you are interested in diving more into this, I can work with you and your team to really change the culture of your organization. There's so many tools. There's just so many tools way beyond the scope of a simple podcast. But there's, because to change a workplace culture into more of a culture of this, it's a long game, it's not an overnight thing. There's a lot of tools that, need to, be implemented and instituted and put into, and even some business systems that you can create that really, bolster this and strengthen it and support the shift. But it also is really, as I mentioned, it's like getting into those spaces of, doing that with you. So starting ground zero, starting with yourself, every person starting with themselves, and they may or may not be willing to do that. But the beauty of this conversation, the beauty of this process is that it doesn't not everybody has to buy in. Because when you start to see things and work with things and innovate with all of these different things that are going on beyond your points of view, beyond your need to prove, beyond your need to defend or avoid or, make anything happen, beyond your need to react, you get out of all of those patterns. And then you really start to see the possibilities that exist in the world. And this is where, again, like those doors of future creations, innovative ideas, innovative processes, creativity, like those doors fling wide open when more of these energies start to play out in your business. Even if it's just you, those doors will fly open. And then you have the fertile soil, you have the ground, the fertile ground to walk through those doors. And you may walk through 10 of them simultaneously just to see, hey, what's going on out here? Like, what are all these possibilities? Let's explore. I don't need to know the answer. I don't need to get it right. Like, let's explore this and this and this and this and see where can we go here. And as you do, it's like what opens up is just incredible. The shift in the culture, the shift in the energy, the shift in the dynamics, the shift in the presence, and the tone of your business changes. It's so potent, it's so dynamic that the innovative creative landscape is wide open. And the process of instituting and bringing all of those creative possibilities to fruition, or at least exploring them. And then, some of them will come to fruition, some of them won't. But the process becomes an adventure. It becomes something that is actually enjoyable for people. It's enjoyable for you as an entrepreneur. Again, even if you're just working on your own, the process becomes one of discovery, an adventure of creation, an adventure of innovation, rather than a limitation, a problem solving, vying for power, defending against the wrongness of you, all these things that we do. All of that goes by the wayside, and there's so much that becomes available. So this is just the world that I would like to see, not only with ourselves, with our bodies, in our relationships, all of them, with our children, with our partners, with our friends, our peers, our coworkers, our colleagues, our quote unquote superiors, all of those things, and the planet, because this is how consciousness moves and expands itself as greater in the world. And it takes on a life force of its own. And so much magic occurs from this space. And it's way easier. Accomplishing things is just so much easier when you do it from this space. So I invite you to that. And if you would like to dive in to way more of that, I offer all kinds of things. There's Business Done Different classes. There's all kinds of classes that I do. I do work with organizations and have availability to do that. So if you want me to work with your staff, whether it's online or in person, that is a possibility. You can email us at info@heathernichols.com, and also work individually with entrepreneurs and just people. Maybe your business is your life, and you don't have a quote unquote business, but you would love to expand into this in every area. I have a 6-month private immersion that I do called Tending the Biome. And it's a one-on-one virtual, ongoing conversation with all kinds of extra resources. That is really a beautiful exploration of you and what you would like to create. And I facilitate and support you in the creation of that. So that is on my website, heathernichols.com. And it's in the one-on-one section of my website. And I also do in-person private intensives, working more dynamically with the body and really diving into your world for, a day or 2 days. I love doing those. They're amazing. So, lots of ways to expand this further if you would like to. And, thank you so much for listening, for being here, for being you. And I hope to see you somewhere in the world sometime soon. Bye for now. Thank you for joining me for the Entrepreneurial Biome podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe. For more resources, check out my website at heathernichols.com and my social media channels as well. Have a beautiful day, and remember that your business thrives when you do.